This short video outlines practical solutions that can reverse desertification and rehydrate Australia. There are 6 interconnected components to the hydration plan, including water, forests, waste management, research, regenerative agriculture, and funding. 1. Since the late 1960s, the Bureau of Meteorology has identified that most of the east coast and southern regions are getting drier, and scattered parts of the north are getting wetter. The first step is to begin the process of diverting water from the wettest parts of Queensland to recharge the drying Murray-Darling Basin using solar concrete channels. The Bradfield system of 1938 proposed taking water from far northeast Queensland. However, this will place additional water stress on the Great Barrier Reef. The Gulf of Carpentaria concept will secure water for inland towns, help protect the $20 billion economy of the Murray-Darling, drive the adoption of water-efficient drip and sprinkler irrigation, and provide environmental flow for reforestation. In order to alleviate the future water shortages, additional desalination plants will be required in all the major cities, which then can be linked to surrounding towns using a national water grid. The existing reservoirs can then be used for current farming and reforestation. The other advantage of expanding desalination plants is that water bottling companies can be stopped from extracting water from depleted fresh and spring water aquifers in rural communities and buy direct from the plants. Australia needs to legislate to increase recycling of water like they do in Israel. Due to long-term extreme water shortages, Israel recycles 85% of its sewage water for agriculture, industry and the environment. 50% of Israelis' water comes from desalination. As part of a hydration plan, we need to remove chemicals that cause damage to aquatic life and our children. Organic phosphates, which block neurons, and endocrine disruptors, which induce feminization in amphibians and disrupt hormones in humans, should not be approved for agricultural use. What is required immediately is a national water log showing all sources of water use in Australia, including streams and groundwater. The water log and policy should show all the catchments, connecting water aquifers, current users and owners of that water, proximity to gas and mineral extraction, what type of fracking has been done, chemicals injected into the aquifers, and latest chemical analysis data from that water source. 2. In order to reverse desertification, Australia needs to double its percentage of forest cover from the current 16% to 32%. New Zealand has also announced an ambitious strategy to plant 1 billion trees by 2028. A realistic target for Australia of 5 billion trees is achievable. Recent research by Nature indicates that reforestation increases groundwater, leading to hydration of the region. A national reforestation strategy urgently needs to be developed here in Australia that includes reforestation of our major rivers, expansion and interconnection of existing forests, and on-farm reforestation. A fully funded national fire management strategy needs to be drawn up for each ecosystem that 1. Current and Aboriginal mosaic burning be conducted in the months leading up to the end of July, and 2. As in South Africa, all private properties must have a 15-metre and forestry plantations a 100-metre cleared boundary fence line before the end of every winter. Over the last 30 years, many log forests have been made into national parks. These forests are now desperate for thinning, and without it will continue to be a huge fire hazard. Australia needs to stop exporting 96% of its timber as wood chips, reintroduce selective rather than clear-fell logging, and focus on high-value timber production by using the thinnings in composite timbers and developing high-quality furniture like this Jeff Hanna cabinet that recently sold for over $1 million. In order to rehydrate the continent, land clearing on farms and subdivision of land for housing needs to be federally outlawed. The reason why forests are so important is that trees work together to form what is called a biotic pump. Through the process of evapotranspiration, large expanses of trees draw water from the ocean and help transport this water through mist and rain to areas further inland. 3. Landfills, as we currently know them, have to be abolished. Digging a big hole and lining it with plastic will not last. These toxins will find their way into our waterways. As adopted in Germany, waste needs to be separated into 3 major streams: food waste, that's vegetable, fruit and animal waste, recyclable waste, and other waste for incineration. Dumping toxic waste in Asia must stop. The separated and collected food waste can be sent to specialised facilities that can produce high quality compost for agriculture. Food waste in Australia accounts for 35% of household waste. If properly composted, this could produce around 2.5 million tonnes of compost annually, eliminating methane production at the landfill sites. Once the food waste and recyclables have been separated, the remaining combustible waste can be incinerated using state-of-the-art German waste-to-energy power plants. These green power plants provide essential baseload power. As discussed earlier, Australia needs to adopt an Israeli approach to how we value water. Sewage water needs to be treated to such a high level that even human adenoviruses are killed. Struvite, a byproduct of sewage plants, can also be used as a fertiliser for agriculture and forestry. Microplastic pollution is a serious problem for Australian waterways, food production and human health. The best way to make a transition away from plastics is to introduce a plastics tax, which could provide research funds for bioplastics technology like Indonesian red seaweed. 4. Australia needs to set up a Water Future Centre and research facility that functions like a modern Department of Soil and Water Conservation. This will bring into the country the best expertise and technology that addresses our goal of hydrating this continent and protecting our soils. This could be located alongside an innovative university that supports regenerative agriculture. We need to identify the best contour farming techniques from Australia and around the world and match those farming designs with our soil types and terrain. Some contour farming techniques include terrace farming from Asia, bund farming from Africa, strip farming from North America, and keyline and natural sequence farming from Australia. It is now essential that we define Australia's national land capability based on current rainfall, soil type, and risk of desertification or flood. The purpose of this is to identify the soil types that exist in the country and what agricultural practices that can occur on them. Australia also needs to map what soil types are valuable for food production and protect the best soil types close to cities and towns from subdivision. Protection of good agricultural land is critical for food security and protecting green space in the future. Australia also needs to set up a national collection of low water use plants from here and around the world. China presently has one, and it could become a partner of what we need to achieve. Local indigenous species will also be included as part of a national collection based on water use and nutritional value. Australia also needs to set up research facilities to provide data around current solutions being proposed. As mentioned, a Water Futures Centre could include local and international specialists working in a number of areas including water, soils, nutrition, and developing world's best greenhouse technology. 5. In order to rehydrate the landscape, we need to fast-track regenerative farming practice across all of Australia. Regenerative farming is a system of farming principles and practices that increase biodiversity, enriches soils, improves watersheds, and enhances ecosystem services. The first thing that must be done is identify the farm landscape designs that have worked well during the long dry periods here in Australia and overseas. These farms can become educational centres and monitoring points. It is critical that best grazing management systems are identified, documented and implemented across Australia, especially in the grasslands regions. This is critical because good grazing management directly affects the amount of soil carbon and hence soil moisture that builds up across the catchment. There are many benefits to building soil carbon, but two of the most important are that it holds more moisture and nutrients. For every 1% increase in soil organic carbon, an additional 140,000 litres of water per hectare is held. Most Australian soils now are well below 1%. Evidence from around the world indicates that windbreaks increase crop production by 15 to 45%. A national on-farm reforestation program on a minimum of 10% of the property is required to hydrate the landscape. 2/3 of Australian food production, worth more than $14 billion, depends on bees and butterflies. Despite this, we still use bee and butterfly killing chemicals like neonicotinoids. These need to be banned in order to build healthy, plant-rich ecosystems. The whole focus of irrigated agriculture in Australia has to change because what we have done to date has destroyed the ecology and hydrology of these river systems. Our emphasis has to move to agricultural practices that protect water quality, eliminate sediment flow, build soil carbon, and maximise returns per megalitre of water. In many areas, farmers will need to move towards integrated farming practices. These practices incorporate livestock, pastures, green manure crops, agroforestry, and grain production, all using long-term rotations or perennial pastures as a foundation. Biodiversity relates to the number and variety of plants, animals, insects, and microlife in any environment, and the larger the diversity, the healthier the ecosystem. To achieve this, Australia must introduce regenerative farming practices and move away from monoculture cropping. What is important now is to re-educate a whole new generation of farmers and land managers to rebuild natural capital and monitor the changes. Southern Cross University Regenerative Agriculture degree is a world first that provides practical solutions to many of these challenges. This needs to be supported by all levels of government. 6. The key to implementing this hydration plan is finding the correct funding mechanism that puts minimal pressure on the federal government fiscal position. The other important fact is that investment in any project has a flow-on effect. In country areas, for every dollar invested, there is $3 of economic activity. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is based on the wealth of its oil, which is the 22nd largest reserve in the world. They spend only 5% of the interest earned, the rest accumulates. Australia needs to set up a natural capital sovereign wealth fund based on its resources, which are the 8th largest in the world. A 5% tax on rehabilitating the mines would provide an enormous fund for future development and rehabilitation of the country. The Natural Capital Sovereign Wealth Fund can also build its capital by borrowing cash from superannuation funds at a little above cash rates. This cash can be used immediately to implement the hydration plan by buying assets. Introducing a 20% plastic tax will speed up the development of bioplastics and clean up our waterways. These funds can be managed through a Natural Capital Sovereign Wealth Fund. There are a number of priorities that need to be implemented with the hydration plan. The first stage of this plan can begin immediately and the project can be completed by 2030. The priorities, approximate costs and jobs created are set out in this table. The economic value of the hydration plan to the rural community with flow-on effects will exceed $300 billion and have a long-term effect on rural confidence and investment. In summary, the federal government is wanting to increase agricultural exports from $50 to $100 billion. Without water, this will not happen. The hydration plan is based on an existing solution that needs a professional team to put it together. To begin with, key government and business figures need to get together and begin a dialogue.